Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us today. Poets are at the forefront, as I've heard these wonderful words from Dr. Thelma T. Reyna, how the era of the pandemic has impacted the world. And she took on the leadership role to do a literary piece of work. And these are some of the wonderful poets that we are very honored to have on today's show. So with that, let me pass it over to Dr. Thelma Reyna from Golden Foothills Press to tell us about it and then to introduce the wonderful poets that we have here today.
Thank you very much, Armando. And it's such a pleasure to be here in the company of these other wonderful colleagues, and always a pleasure to be on your show, Armando. And you set it up beautifully. We all knew when the coronavirus finally hit our shores that this was a horrific disease, that there was going to be a lot of death, a lot of suffering, because we were seeing it in the world already. So I reached out to 50 what I call distinguished authors. That's my term for all of these folks, to 50 distinguished authors, not just my local colleagues and friends, but others that I know or knew of from across America. And I invited them to join me on a contemporaneous journey of documenting in poetry or in prose our experiences as we were living the coronavirus day to day, week to week, month to month. I was very fortunate that 45 of these wonderful people said, yes, count me in. And so I asked them to send me up to 5 pieces of writing, any genre, any length, any type. I became the 46th poet because I could. I had room, and so over a period of 7 months or so, we collected these writings, and they were published in September, early September of 2020, approximately 7 months after we began the project. In this book, it's a national award-winning book. I think it has won 3 honors now because of the poets like these. And it's called, again, When the Virus Came Calling, COVID-19 Strikes America. So today, I have asked each of these wonderful poets, and I'm going to share their bios with you before I introduce them or ask them to read. I've asked them to read a couple of works from the anthology, and then we're going to cycle around, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to ask them to read something new that they have written since the publication of this book. And then we're going to be opening it up to a free-flowing discussion amongst us of the pandemic then, how it affected our lives, and the pandemic now, how it has changed us or is still changing us, what we think looking back, what we've learned, what we think that our society has learned from living through this historic, once in a century travesty that has devastated us all. So I'm going to start off with the ladies first, even though we're feminists around here too. I am very happy to introduce to you Dr. Gerda Goviin Ituarte, and sometimes she is known, some of her publications are simply under Gerda Goviin. But Gerda Goviin Ituarte is author of Poetry Within Reach in Unexpected Places, Future Awakes in Mouth of Now, Alterations, Threadlight Through Eye of Storm, Oh, Where is My Candle Hat, and numerous other publications in many, many literary venues. She served as editor of the Pasadena Rose Poets Poetry Collection in 2019, Reflection, Resistance, and Reckoning, and Resurrection. And in the summer of 2016, Gerda created a 4-week reading series for the City of Pasadena Cultural Affairs Division. And she called this gathering and presentation the Rose Poets. And they regularly met in the city council meetings voluntarily with full permission of the officials, and started off the meetings, basically helped to start them off by sharing some of their original poetry. It's a wonderful tradition that is still continuing to this day. Gerda Goviin was awarded an NEA grant and was a runner-up for the International Women's Month Poetry Contest. You can visit her website at poetryartbookstation.com. And without further ado, here is Gerda Govine and her wonderful poetry.
Bloom. Today, ideas bloom. Want poetry to make a difference in a world gripped by fear and not knowing. How can poets make a difference? How can they help us breathe? How can they give us moments filled with words that cause us to laugh, think, feel, be? That each of us as poets create words that feed our souls, free our minds, make us thankful to be alive. What can we do to till the soil? What can we do to calm the wind? Let each of us as poets create hope to relish sun on our faces, rain on our backs, and trees, flowers, animals who shine for us. Show off their best by just being there. We are the words. We are the readers. We are the ones who walk in the rain between raindrops. We are the ones who light up the dark, keep door of possibilities open. We are the ones who offer our poems as a gift to the world, one word at a time. I'd like to read a second poem from this wonderful award-winning anthology. Grit and Grief for my dear friend. Unwavering strength woven into her curls, her own pandemic from within, invisible invader, could not get out of chair, ravaged enemies threatened to steal life away. Power of poetry, reflect and resurrect words to enter, to impact, to heal. They soothe sounds of now. She inhales, living while shadows gather. She thinks about those gone who still whisper in her ears and hold a tender place only she can fill. This woman gifts us the magic of moments with those who love her without script. For them, keeping her close is the only option as she nourishes us from a distance, without arms to hold, kisses to plant, hands to entwine, unable to gather at birth, birthdays, graduations, funerals. Even when tears flood their eyes, smiles and laughter show up. She appears in sunrise, sunset, clouds, because we know where to find her spirit. Words come calling, find her, know they will be honored. She thinks about those gone, hold a tender space as she walks on high wire with grit and grief between her teeth.
Thank you, Gerda. Now the audience can see what I was talking about. Thank you so much. And the first poem that Gerda read, by the way, Bloom, was actually the very first poem in the book, because I felt that this was a good way of opening the door to all of the writers that were following. Next, our next featured guest is Michael Hausler. And Michael Hausler has been teaching in Los Angeles for 42 years. In 2002, he self-published his first book, which was a children's book, Where is God's Prayer? In 2011, he published his first novel about teaching high school, which Mike actually did in his career as well. And the book was called Results May Vary. Michael is a poet and loves writing and loves books. He grew up in New England, lived in Europe for a few years, and for relaxation, travels through the deserts and mountains of California. He is inspired by many things, but most of all by his wonderful wife, Terry. Michael is also an accomplished chess player, prolific reader. He believes that perhaps the best way to learn is to read, and that reading frees us from space and time and allows us to go anywhere and do anything. He says, quote, "If you love to learn, read. You will never be bored, and you will always make friends wherever you go," unquote. Without further ado, here is Michael Hausler.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's a pleasure to be with all of these wonderful people. I'm so honored. I thought I would read a small essay that I wrote for when the virus came calling. It's called "The World Gets Quiet." Recently, I received a letter referring to this time in which we are now sharing called the pause. The term caught my attention, and since I read that better, I have seen it a number of times. I feel it captures the essence of what is now taking place on our planet. These are indeed strange times. I find irony in the fact that each year large numbers of people die from tuberculosis, malaria, and the flu. But this pandemic brings us all together to a table of common concern. Its effects among the poor demonstrate that poverty is always the truest economic indicator. It does seem that our Earth is free, temporarily anyway, of the violent depredations we daily inflict upon it. And the results are immediately seen all over the world. These thoughts have helped me keep the pause in perspective and stay clear of the freaking out response. I was in Death Valley the day before Governor Newsom called for the lockdown here in California, where I live. Death Valley was pristine. I lay on the sand dunes reading my book and gazed up into the Panamint Mountains. Deep shadows, great wide alluvial fans, impossibly panoramic vistas. The imposing beauty of racing white clouds and towering thunderheads. The distance between myself and nature dissolved. I drove back to Los Angeles on empty roads. On the drive, I thought about growing up in New England because the trip to the desert has somehow reminded me of that time. As a boy, I lived outdoors, zoomed everywhere on my 3-speed bicycle, rode to the coast to eat hot clams while overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, rode to the Concord River to go canoeing, rode to Walden Pond and swung birches out over and into the water. In between adventures, I read books, so many books. When I read Silent Spring, Rachel Carson captured my heart and my mind. As soon as I read her sentences, I knew I was reading truth. Her vision merged straight into my boyhood adventures and dreams. Her thinking seemed so natural. The idea of ecology seemed as real and as immediate as the snow on the blue spruce outside my window and the red cardinal singing in its boughs. She said, "Those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts. There is something infinitely healing in the repeated refrains of nature, the assurance that dawn comes after night and spring after winter." She wrote these words in Silent Spring, and it made perfect sense to me. Lately, I've been seeing pictures of the animals in Yosemite coming out to wander the campgrounds and hotels, wild goats on the streets of Wales, lions asleep on African roads. Now, when I walk in the morning, sometimes I see coyotes running down our streets. And in the evenings, the sky over the city has never been so clear. Each night, I step outside onto the patio to stare up at bright planets and stars, as if seeing them for the first time. Since we were told to shelter in place, the temperatures have remained in the 70s, and there has been a steady on and off rain, gentle and pure, or occasionally lashing and cold, but always welcome. The hills have been verdant, though summer is around the next corner. The daily beauty I see in these ordinary landscapes has been amplified, offering perspective. This pandemic is being portrayed as a ruthless and unbending thing. But the pandemic is not the only enemy we need fear. The wild animals sailing forth, the crystal clear skies, the deep azure waters are telling us something about time, about the time in which we live, the times we have created. Many have now passed under the shadow of this virus, but many more, far more have reemerged into the light. The larger issue may be the way we have come to interact with the earth, with the animals, and the fellow human beings who inhabit it alongside us. The world cries out for a new ecology, a revision. Can we do that? It remains to be seen. Thank you. Of course, I wrote that at the very beginning, right when we were first experiencing this terrible pandemic. As the pandemic unfolded, I wrote a short series of haiku, which I'd like to read next. Each haiku stands alone as a single haiku, but may also be seen together as a tale. The sequence is called This Year's COVID-19. Here we go again. Corona's annual shade. It's time we blanked out. I went through this twice, 57, 68, a million dead each. Something has changed. Techno, intrusion fades, welcome screens, fears become cravings. How quickly distance becomes the new social norm, jacked into our screens. When it fades away, our phones will own us more than we've ever been owned. Tracked, measured, owned, gone. Who will you be in this space with all walls torn down? Plug in, turn off, dream. Devil's nightmares, blissful smiles. Corona, who cares? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you very much. Definitely food for thought. And last but not least, never least, is the amazing Peter J. Harris. He is a writer and cultural worker. He is the winner of many literary honors. Peter was a 2018 Los Angeles COLA, C-O-L-A, Fellow in Literary Arts. He was a fellow of the Los Angeles Institute for the Humanities at USC. He is the author of Bless the Ashes, a poetry collection, and he is winner of the 2015 PEN, P-E-N, Oakland Josephine Miles Award, and The Black Man of Happiness, In Pursuit of My Inalienable Rights. He has written personal essays. He has won the 2015 American Book Award, which is one of our nation's highest literary honors. And Peter Harris has published his work in a wide variety of publications, including most recently in the genre of fiction, Flint Hills Review, in the genre of essay, Los Angeles Review of Books, and in the genre of poetry, Voices from Leimert Park Redux. Peter is the founding director of the Black Man of Happiness Project, a creative, intellectual, and artistic exploration of Black men and joy. His website is blackmanofhappiness.com/shop. Check out all the wonderful things that Peter has created. Without further ado, Peter J. Harris.
Thank you, Dr. Thelma. Greetings all. I am just a citizen. The voice of fear is a flimsy tourniquet against the danger. Children have stopped playing in the rain. Their mothers, their fathers cannot see their futures. Will someone speak the drenched language? Who will spill water from their tongue? Mouth to mouth, against all danger, refreshed and announcing, I am just a citizen, but I can heal the world. I am just a citizen, but I can defend the children. I am just a citizen, but I can grant their wishes. The voice of paralysis is a one-sided broadcast without complaint. Without complaint, heroes have limped a coward's retreat. their lovers, their teachers cannot feel their power. Will someone leap the hollow language? Who will muscle daring into their leap? Hand to hand, resolving complaint, convinced, revealing, I am just a citizen, but I honor conviction. I am just a citizen, but I sip revelation. I'm just a citizen, but I live my intention. We can find enemies anywhere. Where are the allies dedicated to chumping fear and paralysis? We can find the danger anywhere. Where are the havens draped with honeysuckle for food, for wisdom? We can find gangrene anywhere. Where are the vitamins spiked with helium for circulation, for vision? We can find silhouettes anywhere. Where are the citizens? Where are the citizens? The voice of bravery, a chant of lightning, freezing the mirage, freezing the mirage. Heroes are charting the quicksand. Their footprints, their trail marks harden into muddy architecture. Will someone stride with common purpose? Who will gather to inspect the promise of oasis? Voice to voice, claiming the mirage, honored, rejoicing. We are the company of the citizens. We are the company of the citizens. We are the company of the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. That's a very amazing and very, very timely poem. Now we're going to have an opportunity to hear some new work from each of our poets. So I'm cycling back to Gerda Govine Ituarte, and then we're going to go to Michael Hausler, and then back to Peter, and then I'll be the caboose at the end of the line with one of my new poems. Okay, Gerda.
This next poem I'm going to read will be part of a new collection of poetry that will be published next year. Hands. We miss, need, and want hands to touch, caress, and intertwine. Hands are silent witness to our life stories. Know how to speak for us when words may not work. To beckon someone or wave goodbye. Hands help us wash clothes, tie ribbons, unravel knots, bake cakes, soothe aches, and warn us. Hands bring us into this world, our first human touch outside of the womb. Hands help us rise up, hold, pull, push, break, fall, shield. Our hands clench into fists, fold to pray, ask for forgiveness, or atone for missteps. Hands up, handcuffs, and handicap may provoke and fan flames of fear. Other words evoke a variety of emotions and responses. Hands on, hand in hand, handy, handshake, hand me down, handgun. The loss of human touch leaves a voice, a void, a chasm that haunts and separates us. Our hands, a divining rod, yearn to touch and be touched in return. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gerda. That was a heartwarming, very lovely poem. And now we're going to cycle back to Michael Hausler.
Thank you so much. I decided it would be appropriate to write a new haiku sequence, so I'm kind of bookending the pandemic. We're told to open up. New infections rage worldwide. What is going on? Malls suddenly fill, masked, unmasked, who knows what's what. Just follow the crowd. You've become data, points measured on a graph, but CFR unchanged. Vaccine is required, but do we read the insert? Many shouldn't take. My state opening, India piling corpses, Taiwan shutting down. PPP ending, new pandemic, inflation. Are there no new plans? Today, 1 year gone. George Floyd murdered, but hopes raised. May love conquer hate. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And let's hear some new work from Peter J. Harris.
Start with Black girls. Stroke their daughter faces. Levitate when you hear them, and clap, clap when you see them dance. Study their jump rope choreography. Listen when they open their minds. Caress their hair even after bowing to the demands of discipline. Pool their tears to irrigate sadness. Chant the language of tomorrow as you rock, baby, to sleep. Trace the path of braids. Follow each purring strand out to nappy edges, baby hair, and ungreased ends. From 3 times tied to whip tip thin, dangling, tucked, or beaded, a crown of tightly laced layers, jewels upon handcrafted threads, light skipping across precious stones, sparks flashing along plaited patterns, halos in flame, inflaming long wrapped twine in my glowing hands. If I was Peabo Bryson, or any singer in love, or any singer about love, I would swirl your name in my mouth before saying it. Warm your name under my shirt before writing it. Polish each word before telling friends and family my vows. I part black hair. Scalp smiles white. I dab oil, soak skin, mix with damp shampoo, smells like fruit grove. I stroke the furrow, black hair shines clean. I tug a handful, squeeze it out of style. Snake my fingers through the thicket, crawl around dark roots. Your smells, your voices extend my offshore waters. You tower in my sight like the ruins of great Zimbabwe. Your ever presence invisibly clouds my spirit. I bury my face, I bury my sight into yielding cushion, licks my fingers, wet touch plows new roads. Kinky entanglement tickles my nostrils. Bush paints my eyelids. You walk into a room. I breathe through my eyes. You listen when I am all electrical. You massage my bruises with moody tales of watercolor adventures. You see our future when my imagination freezes over. I trace the path of braids. Forest grows natural, absorbs sunlight, blooms toward the sky. I tuck the burning between my fingers. I wait until I can replant the heat in the twisted garden where it belongs.
How could anyone follow that? Peter, that is very beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
I will be the caboose, and I will bring up the end here. This is a new poem. No one has seen it or heard it, and so it's still a work in progress. And it's called The Sunlight Summons. Here at the kitchen bay, pain streaked with pre-pandemic dust, pain of neighbors lost, smudged with leaves and bird bits caught in corners. Here where shaggy trees untrimmed scrape edges of the view, vines twined where they don't belong. Here where phone to ear, I've learned of losses near and far, wept muted tears alone, thrown undrunk coffee down the sink. Here, where winter sun slants low, and indifferent crows flap past to splash in muddied water baths. Here, where for a year, silence was this room, this home, days dawdling indistinct, marking numbers that numb our screens in evening, sunlight grudging itself to sleep.
Mhm.
Tomorrow, sunlight will beckon once more, rays and hours cycling undeterred, boding bright spots to waylay pain, a hummingbird, an open bloom, a blue roof vast and swirled with ribbons of cloud. And we can hope again, here at this kitchen bay. I marvel at the mettle of nature, of how it marches its beauty forth despite death, despite human error, despite unrelenting loneliness. Here, the sunlight is always here.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you all so much. And now it's time for our discussion. You know, how did the pandemic past affect you? What did it do to your thinking, to your values, to how you were seeing your fellow humanity? And contrast that with the pandemic present. How are you feeling now? What have you learned? What are you wishing that you can do, that our society can do as we move forward in the second year of the pandemic? And whoever wishes to to speak up, just go ahead and do so.
All right. One of the things that struck me initially with the pandemic was, for me, what I call the slowing down of time. The open places and spaces in my life that maybe weren't so open before. I also learned to be patient, and I learned I had a whole different way of shopping and even making out the list and venturing downtown to get what we need to get every couple of weeks. So it was a place where, yes, a lot of things I didn't like, but it was also a place where I was writing about things I had never written about before. I've written about the animals, the landscape, the wind. So by my being able to kind of slow down and stretch out, I was able to really get back to me. And the other thing, it's that it also allowed me to notice things I wouldn't notice, like how many birds are flying overhead, you know, when there's a red-tailed hawk and when the crows come like an army of kamikaze pilots to kick its butt because they want to eat their young. So it allowed me to breathe in ways I wasn't accustomed to breathing. And writing became my medicine. Writing became my friend. Writing was in every breath I kept a pencil and pad in every room. It's like I could be listening to a soccer game and there's an announcer. Oh my God, he starts talking and I'm writing furiously. Or I see a billboard. So it's as though my brain and my life was a magnet for words that kept coming at me. And I don't write every day because I would be a crazy person. I can't be that disciplined. But I'm in a writing group. So every Wednesday morning by 9 o'clock, I have to have 3 poems.
Wow.
So guess when I wrote those poems? Sometimes Tuesday night, sometimes early Monday morning, I'll say, okay, girls, that's what I call the words. Come on, come on. I got to do something. And it hasn't failed me yet. So that was then. Now, the other thing that happened with us, we had a fire out here. We had to evacuate during the pandemic last September. And I've never dealt with fire except when I turned the stove on. And that was a whole nother experience in terms of how well we did. Our house did not burn down, but the wind changed a block before our house. It made a right. And that's the only reason why we're still here. So, and I also learned to be grateful, to be thankful, because we're all still here. So that means we're very lucky in so many different ways. And I'm just about finishing up my new book. And just, I'm like a magnet now. The words just surround me. They play with me. They love me. They take care of me. And I trust them totally. So for me, there's been a lot of pleasant surprises. And neighbors I didn't know, we know now because it was a neighbor that called us to say there was a fire coming over the mountain and we were watching TV. And we evacuated before everybody else. Everything worked out. But it's like, I like the journey and continue to like the journey that was sparked by the pandemic, because it's allowed me to really go deep and wide with joy and gratefulness. And I know that the words in my well will never run dry. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Great. Peter, or who wants to go next?
Well, I was going to say that, in the beginning, I began honestly to think in a lot of different ways all at the same time. Well, first, I stayed very rageful at the dangerous so-called national leadership that really turned its back on the country. I consider the former administration, basically traitors to their whatever principles of leadership and public service that you can conceive of. And so one train of thought was really trying to make sure I stayed alert and channeled my rage at an intentionally caused public health emergency. And every time I spoke to friends and family, I said, I wish you great health during this public health emergency and this national leadership emergency, because certainly the pandemic as a virus, as a creature, was going to do what it does and what it's been doing for billions of years. But to have such just incompetent mendacity at the top of the government, and during that time, with the dismissive, disrespectful, dehumanizing continuation of an approach to so-called governance. That was the first thing, is to stay political, stay smart, and to stay in resistance mode to that dangerous set of leaders. And the other thing at the same time is I began to sort of put myself in a historical framework and remember that, the men and women and the children who were here as indigenous folk before the full arrival of Europeans when they encountered the immigrants of those days, they were confronted with novel viruses, and they were devastated and decimated by that set of bio harm. And so I began to do some research and hunger to communicate with more men and women here in the LA region, asking questions. Who's doing research? What are the native indigenous folk talking about? And my friend Christina Wong, I watched her and her team just really take control and start designing and sewing and shipping masks and PPE to the Navajo Nation, et cetera. And I wasn't active in that way, but I wanted to make sure conceptually I did not act as if suddenly this is the first time anybody in this landmass had suffered. Of course, at the same time, thirdly, I began to write a blog. My first blog of the pandemic was, I think, in March, and it was the longest I had written. And I really wanted to do some of this exploration. My blog is called Wreaking Happiness. And I really wanted to embrace the creative and ugly tensions around how do you think still about being joyful. And I started reading books about how do you stay, keep your eye on the prize, as Black folks have said for years in America. And so I began to write with deep, deep compassion. And I began to quote some of my teachers, Ella Baker and Joy Harjo and her poetry and other writers. And I began to just sort of analyze how this all kind of came together. And when you have a situation like this, if your leadership is not serious, that it will just activate all of the inequalities. It'll calcify all the inequalities. And as we saw with the passages of laws where billions of dollars are starting to circulate, and the people who were already in position to get the money got the money. They didn't need the money like the people who are picking food and who are bagging your groceries and the nurses. And if the piss poor leadership of the country had really said, you know what, I'm going to rise to this occasion, not for credit, not so that I could just say, look at me, warp speed, we created no, that's that selfishness that I was against from day one. But if the leadership had risen to the occasion and really seen the world through the eyes of public service and public health, maybe, of course, folks would have passed away. I mean, my family members were sick. We didn't lose anybody to death. But when you're talking 500,000-600,000 people, when you're spending your time waving pennants saying this is the greatest country in the world, blah, 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 and people are dropping like flies, the only thing I can infer is that you don't care about the people who are dying. And those are the things that really anchored my resistance, my sense of passion and compassion. As it relates now, I'm certainly happy and that I took the vaccine. My kids have taken, everybody's healthy. But I still, and of course we've got a change in national leadership, but yet the systematics of the country still allow for the ugly, lying, angle to still have its day. We can't even come to a conclusion that you can, investigate an actual coup attempt, because the people are still going down to Mar-a-Lago kissing the butt of somebody who could care less about anybody who's not named after him. Anyway, so from the beginning, I've been thinking with dimension. I continue to think with dimension, and my dimensions include resistance, etc., but it also includes hope and imagination for solving problems for the good of as many people as possible.
Amen. Absolutely. And Michael, what?
I think
present?
hearing these two wonderful writers speak it's so compelling. You're talking about this gap, for lack of a better term. Like Gerda, I became extremely enamored of the quiet and the silence, and I was able to write. I'm writing 2 brand new books. One is a memoir, one is fiction. I made terrific progress, and I'm very happy about that. I was very motivated, and the words came very easily. And like Gerda, I don't write on any kind of a regular schedule. I write when the spirit moves me, but the words are always there, and I've written a lot. These are going to be long books, and I'm very happy about that. But like Peter, I also was completely dismayed by the political situation unfolding in the United States, not only around COVID, but the political situation following George Floyd's murder at the hands of the police in Minneapolis, and the way the country seemed to split around that. And I'm still extremely dismayed by what's going on politically in our country. And I'm very worried about it as well. But having said that, I want to talk a little bit about what I do. I'm a teacher, I'm a professor. When the pandemic came along, I was right in the middle of a methods class that I teach at Cal State LA. And the president came on the loudspeaker system, and he told us that school was going to be canceled, and that was going to be the end of that story. And the next week, we had no class. That's when I took my trip to Death Valley. I jumped on the opportunity. I figured they'd probably close that down pretty soon, and that was probably one place that was still safe. But since I've come back and taught my students, it's been a very interesting experience. I teach families. Most of my students are in their 20s and 30s. They're fairly young, compared to me. And watching them struggle with Zoom and the technology has been a fascinating and an educational time. Some of them have done really well. Some of them found that their time on Zoom suited them, but some of the others, particularly the families, it became a real struggle, a real genuine struggle, and sometimes a nightmare. Families with little kids where mom was home, dad was home, the kids were home, they're all there at the same time. Going to my class online was a real burden. And now that things seem to be winding down, I'm not quite sure what that means yet. I don't think I have the faith that a lot of people have that it's over. Maybe it's over for us in this privileged country for the moment, but I'm not sure it's completely over. I think we may be far from it, but anyway, some of my students are quite concerned about coming back in the fall. Some of them are even thinking about dropping out of school and waiting until things are clearly better. So that's another thing that I've noticed. The Zoom has been very interesting. I also tutor high school kids. That's my second job. And some of them have done very well with Zoom, but like my college students, some hate it. So I think the point is that this Zoom technology that we're using right now for this conversation and these readings is a very interesting technology. And I think that it's not going to go away completely. My university is talking about hybrid classes, moving forward with hybrid classes, even if the virus goes away completely, continuing to move forward with hybrid classes because it does suit some people very well. And it's a real burden on some other people. So learning the Zoom technology, which I got really good at, was an interesting experience for me as a teacher. They want me to teach my classes in hybrid in the fall. And for the moment, I'm just holding my breath and biding my time. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen between now and the fall.
Mhm.
The changing of the way that we perceive time that Gerda was talking about is very interesting. Fall seems like a long, long
Mhm.
way away to me right now.
Mhm.
So many things could happen between now and the fall. But pre-pandemic, fall would feel like it's just around the corner and I've got to get in what I can do during the summer and then I've got to gear up again. I don't feel that way now.
Mhm.
So it's been a very interesting time period teaching. And the last thing I'll say is when you teach this screen that we're looking at now, I've got 60 little boxes that I'm looking at
Mm.
too. And as the semester goes on, after a while, you feel like you're zooming into these people's lives. You're zooming into their rooms, their offices, their kids walk across behind them, their wife comes through. It's very intimate in a strange way. It's no substitute for live teaching, but it's very interesting. Some of my students brought their kids online and they're real small kids. And they said, do you want to meet Professor Hauser's class? And they said, yeah. And they came on and they, chatted with us. So it's been an interesting time period. I think that their education has been somewhat hampered by having to learn through Zoom. No matter how good you get at Zoom, it's not the same thing as being in a real classroom with live people where you pick up all the cues, you notice everything, you hear everything, you see everything, you feel everything. You don't feel things through Zoom. And when you're trying to keep track of 60 little boxes, it becomes a very, very burdensome task. I also zoomed into high school classes where I was supervising student teachers. And the thing I noticed about the high school students, which we haven't really spoken of here, the high school students, for the most part, just turn off their cameras. And you don't know if they're there. And you don't know if they're listening. And you don't know what they're learning. And it's reinforced when the teacher calls on them and there's no response. So I'm also very concerned about what the high school students and middle school students and little kids have lost perhaps this year. I don't know if they've really lost as much as they say, but I'm concerned about that because I was a high school teacher for a long time before I became a university professor. And I actually worry more about those kids than I do about my college students who I know will probably bounce back. Anyway, those are some thoughts I have.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much.
I've had the honor of listening to practically all the poets, almost 40 plus poets, and I am just overwhelmed by the beauty of the words that all of them have used, and obviously today as well. And I wanted to respond to the question about pre and post and where we are today with the virus. I agree with many points that you all have mentioned, and I can see a lot of depth in what you're all saying. But one thing that stands out in my mind that I want to highlight is the amount of people on the planet that deny that it all happened. The amount of denial that is still surviving, and how hard people work at saying that what happened didn't happen. How much effort and money and time, and they're willing to put their lives on the line to prove that nothing happened. Yet I watch sports where players are playing by themselves. I watch people sitting in places by themselves, people doing Zoom throughout the world. People are afraid to have the Olympics because of and to say the pictures that we're getting from India and South America and Brazil. And yet somewhere in there, I get somebody saying, this is all false. I can't fathom that. I can't understand if we're a democracy on a world basis, and we're all supposed to be able to elect leaders when the world says people are dying in the millions, but it's not happening, I'm totally confused. But I'm happy, and I find hope in individuals like all of you who are the poets, who remind us that it's there. And there's a reflections of the problem from different points of view, but it's not a group of people that say, let's shut our eyes and let's say it never happened. And that is the group of people on this planet that really I don't understand.
And I think I agree, and I think that's something that has bothered probably all five of us for all of last year and all of this year. And I think it leads back to what Peter was saying about the leadership, about the top, about the denials, about the diminishment of science, about the trashing of science, the dishonoring of investigative journalists, people who were trying to tell the truth. And we see it every single day still. And I think that that is going to be something that history is not going to look very kindly upon the United States regarding in these 2 years, especially 2019, 2020, because the prior leadership has poisoned the well. They brainwashed people for their own self-interests. The QAnon conspiracy is flourishing more than ever, and we have Congress people in it right now who are still spouting. We have Senator Rand Paul, who is still spouting lies and misinformation about COVID, even though he has had it. So when people at the top continuously lie and hang on to the lies and spread it, the power of their megaphone, the power of their bully pulpit is immense. And I think that we just were blindsided by all of this. And it's a pity that we are still in that. And all these people that are part and parcel of that, history will not be kind to them. And we just have to kind of see it through and just keep plodding along. And hopefully, people will come to their senses. I agree totally with everything that everyone has said, so I don't have very much to say. I just wanted to say that one of the things that has really, really struck me is the resilience. The human resilience is just amazing. Aside, not the incompetent, dishonest, selfish people that led our administration in the past time. I'm not talking about them. I have nothing nice or positive to say about them. But when we look at the frontline workers, besides the poets, when we look at families, the parents, the students that Michael talked about, where they plunk their little toddler on their lap, when we look at how America in general, because that's what our book focused on, that's what a lot of us tend to focus on. When we look at how the people responded, when the government did not give us masks, did not give us PPEs, as Peter was saying, people little children were sewing masks of their own. Little children were standing on street corners, giving away their masks. The people of America dug deep, I think, for the most part, and they found ways to work around this. Education still continued. We in the literary world, we lost our libraries, we lost our bookstores, we lost all our festivals, all the venues we had before, but we turned to Zoom. And however we struggled with it, however bad, however tedious or unenjoyable it was, we kept the camaraderie and the sharing and the reading of literature alive through whatever methods were available to us. So I think that resilience is one thing that has been very, very joyous for me to see, and very happy for us to treasure. And for me personally, I believe that this pandemic forced me to slow down. I wish I had Gerda's immense energy and productivity. I wish I could say, like Michael has said, that he has written 2 long books. I have been hardly creative. The book came out in September, and I have been in a very long dry spell since then. But the pandemic has forced me to stop, to take things slowly, to not be guilty about lazing around. I live alone for the most part, so my time is whatever I wish to make of it. It has taught me to enjoy nature, to take a deep breath, to slow down, to try to recalibrate, and to just think more deeply on things that are going on. And despite everything, despite all the challenges, hope springs eternal in the human breast. And I, for one, believe that we shall get beyond this, and that the people who cause so much harm and continue to cause so much harm to humanity, that they shall be pushed aside and their power shall be gone. And the people who are trying to help humanity, the Native American people of the world who are trying to help their fellow beings, I think they shall prevail. So thank you for proving to the world that even in a pandemic, the poetic voices are not going to be stilled. The essayist is not going to be silenced. We shall find a way to, maneuver around the roadblocks. And of course, people like Armando Sanchez, you are making this possible hugely better for us with all the work that you do. So thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you.
And for doing this work, always doing this work. So thank you all very much for tuning in today. And we look forward to hearing from you. If you have any questions about our writing, about our book, about anything that has been discussed today, please keep in mind that each of us has a website, and you can go and ask. Actually, all of their websites are also listed at the back of this book in the author bio section. And my website, www.goldenfoothillspress.com. You can learn more about each of these writers and how to contact us and communicate with us. We have emails too. So we're looking forward to staying in touch with you, and thank you for tuning in with us.